Oh, welcome back to another video, y'all. We in here early, ain't we? Let's get right into it.
Getting started.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Marvel just announced that they've totally removed the Blade movie from their release calendar and didn't give it a later date, meaning it's basically canceled for the foreseeable future. That's like the nice way that Marvel cancels a movie. Like, maybe someday we'll release it, but probably not. We'll explain what's going on, why they keep trying to ice skate uphill, like why it's been so hard for them to make a movie about a dude killing vampires. Wesley Snipes did it so well. Ryan Reynolds has also been campaigning for Marvel to make another Wesley Snipes Blade movie to give him a proper send-off, and they just announced that they're fast-tracking a Midnight Suns movie, so that might be their backup plan if they can't figure out the Blade movie. So we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. Big reminder that Venom: The Last Dance is out this week. My review should post on Wednesday. My full post-credit scene video, Easter eggs, breakdown for the entire movie will start posting after it actually comes out later this week. We're also doing a movie ticket giveaway for that. All you have to do to enter is just post all your predictions for what you want them to do with Blade in the MCU going forward. But you probably saw recently that Marvel just completely obliterated the Blade movie from their movie release schedule. This was them finally throwing in the towel, saying they could not figure out a good enough story in the next couple of years. If they'd been close, they would have just delayed it by like a couple months or a year or something like that, but they did not do that. They just completely removed it from their release schedule. Originally, it was supposed to come out November 2025. Obviously, they weren't going to get the movie out by then, so we thought that they were going to delay it no matter what. There are at least two dates that they could have used during 2026 or 2027. The only movies that they have scheduled for those years are Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, so like they could have put it any time during 2026 or 2027, but they completely removed it from their schedule and then added 3 more mystery movies to 2028 after Secret Wars, so it sounds like they're just completely pivoting past the Blade movie. Like, you know what? Let's not do the Blade movie. Maybe someday in like 50 years we'll figure out the Blade movie. So RIP, pour one out for Mahershala Ali's Blade movie. They're slowly making that Deadpool and Wolverine Wesley Snipes Blade joke more and more true every day.
There's only been one Blade. There's only ever going to be one Blade.
As funny as that was, there was a Sticky Fingers version of Blade on TV, so technically there has been another Blade, but I think the idea with this Deadpool and Wolverine joke is they're pretending like that never existed. Like Wesley Snipes and Ryan Reynolds are saying, there is no Blade TV series. We don't know what you're talking about. You even might remember that the disgraced showrunner from X-Men 97, Beau DeMayo, was hired to write one of the earlier versions of the Blade movie a couple years ago. This is long before he got into trouble with Marvel and got fired from X-Men 97. He says he wrote 3 drafts and a dozen outlines in 3 months, but his favorite that he wrote was a raid-style treatment where Blade finds himself defending a rundown tenement of humans from Varney's vamp hordes until daylight. The Varney character is a villain vampire from the Doctor Strange comics, so like it's a big Marvel crossover character. He says the entire movie takes place over a single night, and he learns from one of the tenants, Jericho Drum, also a Marvel character, that Varney's attacking them because there's a female tenant also living there who Blade kind of fancies, as he calls it, like she becomes a love interest in the movie, has been magically impregnated with Lilith by the other tenants who are secretly Darkhold cultists. More Darkhold talk, where we got into that during Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness during WandaVision. So he says, think of the movie as 30 Days of Night meets Rosemary's Baby. The baby is Lilith. Then he says, in the end, Blade is forced to decide what to do with her, the woman, in the baby Lilith in the final act to keep the mother of evil out of Varney's hands as the first vampire arrives to kidnap her. Drum winds up bringing out some old voodoo occult objects to help Blade, in the end, defeat the Varney character. Then he says he got fired off of the movie before he was able to work on it more. It sounds like at the end of that movie, Blade is deciding what to do with the love interest. He never names who they actually would have been, like just a generic love interest, but she's still pregnant with Lilith. It sounds like he's implying that the ending would have had him not killing the baby still in her womb. Both the mother and the baby Lilith survived to the sequel movies. Sort of like a Grogu Mandalorian situation with Blade becoming like the Mandalorian, having to deal with this kid who is technically Lilith, wondering whether or not she ever will turn evil because she is technically Lilith. It'd be kind of like the Mandalorian if he was more worried about Grogu turning to the Sith. Generally sounds like a pretty solid pitch for at least that first Blade movie, depending on where they want to take things in the future. Obviously, they're not making that movie now. They fired Bo DeMeo a long time ago, so they've moved on to like a completely separate plot for the film.
Attention all internet users. Stop seeing ads for free when you can get paid to see them. Do you know how much of the content you see on a daily basis?
There are a couple other versions of the movie that involve Blade's daughter. Kit Harington's Black Knight was supposed to return during another earlier version of the movie and hunt Dracula with him using the ebony blade in his full Black Knight armor in present day. That was basically what the whole Eternals post-credit scene was meant to set up. It was the first appearance of Mahershala Ali's Blade in the MCU, and so far, the only appearance of his Blade. But I think he's actually supposed to come back for another cameo scene during the Marvel Zombies animated series, so technically there'll be like two versions of Mahershala Ali's Blade that we've seen in the MCU at a certain point. You only heard his voice in that post-credit scene, but you can tell that it's him.
Sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman?
What they were going to do when they actually made that post-credit scene, like one of their first plans, was to say that Blade had encountered the ebony blade earlier in his life, and part of one of the versions of the movie was going to show flashbacks to him in the 1920s and earlier, just to show the history of the blade itself through the history of the Black Knight family and all of his different ancestors that wielded the blade, going back to Camelot. So there was a whole bunch of Black Knight in one of the versions of the movie, but then later versions got rid of him and just used the ebony blade. There was a version where Lilith was going to show up in the past. This was when the movie was going to take place in the 1920s. She was going to try and control the ebony blade. Then they were going to carry that forward into present day just to give you a through line of the ebony blade heading to their Midnight Suns movie that they had been planning for a while. Since then, the last several years, there have been countless different writers, countless different versions of the movie, and Mahershala Ali apparently just is not happy with any of those versions. So if it wasn't clear, he's actually been the real holdup here, like he's waiting for what he feels like is the perfect Oscar-worthy Blade movie. Normally, you wouldn't think it's that hard to make a movie about a dude killing vampires, but he wants like the Oscar-worthy S+ tier version that's better than the Wesley Snipes Blade movies, and that's the thing that's really hard to do, because those first two Blade movies are top tier. It is going to be really hard to do better than those first two movies. And I think that's been Marvel's other big holdup, is that they don't want to make a Blade movie that feels like it's way, way weaker than Wesley Snipes' Blade. Like, he's right there, he's sitting, waiting to do another Blade movie, and we didn't bring him back. Can you imagine the disgrace that Marvel would feel if they did a Blade movie without Wesley Snipes coming back to cameo, and it wound up being way worse than the previous ones? At this point, it might even be better for Marvel to just pivot to that Logan-style send-off movie for Wesley Snipes' Blade that Ryan Reynolds is trying to make. Originally, Mahershala Ali's Blade movie was supposed to set up a Midnight Suns movie with a bunch of their supernatural characters teaming up against Lilith. And because they're fast-tracking that now, whereas they weren't before, they might actually just be pivoting to that. Like, we'll bring Blade back during that Midnight Suns movie with all the other big supernatural characters, like Moon Knight, Werewolf by Night, Ghost Rider, all the characters that you wouldn't expect to be on a traditional Avengers team, getting their own Avengers-style movie. Previously, Lilith was supposed to be the MCU villain in that movie. She was actually the first villain that the Midnight Suns faced in the comics when they teamed up too, so it makes sense that they would go to her first. They were going to introduce her to the MCU in one of the earlier versions of Mahershala Ali's Blade movie, played by Mia Goth, and she's actually still signed to play Lilith, so she still could continue to do that in Midnight Suns. You might remember that MCU Agatha Harkness actually interviewed her for another movie that she was doing. How prophetic it would be if they both come back in a Midnight Suns movie.
I was not expecting to see you here. Thought you were, retired.
And if you don't remember that era of Marvel movies, or you weren't around yet, like you weren't born yet, or you didn't have a chance to see those movies, Blade Trinity featured a very young version, early superhero version of Ryan Reynolds as Hannibal King from the Marvel Comics. There was a ton of drama on the set of that movie while they were making it. It was reported by wildly in the press, like it became a real big thing. Ryan Reynolds specifically calls it out in some of the jokes during Deadpool and Wolverine, where he says Blade never did like him.
I'm already in the void. I'm not trying to get canceled again.
I don't like you.
You never did.
He's not lying. That's a very accurate statement. On the set of Blade, Wesley Snipes famously went full method actor, meaning that he stayed in character as Blade throughout the entire filming of that movie. It was really serious. He was really hardcore the whole time. And Ryan Reynolds and the other actors, a lot of them comedians in their own right, mostly known for doing comedy movies, tried to get him to break left and right in scenes. Wesley Snipes did not appreciate that, as you can imagine, so it led to very, very tense sets. The way that Ryan Reynolds told the story, he said that he cold called Wesley Snipes after 20 years and sort of pitched him the idea of bringing his Blade character back. Wesley Snipes said that he loved the idea, like he was happy to hear from him to bring Blade back, but he, Wesley Snipes, did not think that Marvel, the studio, would let them do it. Like, they're never going to go for this. Like, even though you want to bring all these characters back, there's no way they're going to want me back. He figured that Marvel didn't really care about his Blade movies or bringing him back at all, which makes it sound like he had not secretly been talking to Marvel about coming back in Mahershala Ali's Blade movie, like Marvel was not even considering bringing him back in that. Which feels like a huge omission, like why wouldn't you even think about bringing him back at some point? Ryan Reynolds calls Wesley Snipes the godfather of both the Fox Marvel universe and the MCU because in his post here he says neither one of those would exist if that first Blade movie had not blown up as big as it did in the 90s, and he is correct in that. That was the movie that made studio executives at different places feel like they could actually create a cinematic universe of movies. Everybody let me know in the comments, if the Blade movie seems like it's not going to happen at like complete chaos, do you think that it's smarter for them to just pivot straight to Midnight Suns? And if they do that, how do you want them to bring Wesley Snipes back as a version of Blade? There are a couple ways they could accomplish that. He could play his version of Blade again from Deadpool and Wolverine. He could also just play a completely different character. Really big reminder, my Venom The Last Dance review will be up on Wednesday, and my full post-credit scene video, Easter eggs, breakdown videos will all start posting Thursday.
Alright, I think we're gonna get out of here. That's interesting. I didn't know that. But I guess